in this video, we're going to take a deeper dive into study groups. We're going to start off by exploring the tasks feature, and then we're going to look at all the different ways in which study groups can be formed, including the spawning feature. Finally, we're going to take a look at raised hands and how they work with study groups. Okay, so let's kick off with the tasks feature. So creating tasks is quite simple. You do it in the Classroom Elements tab here. I can create a task simply by creating a name. So I'm going to call this task Getting to Know Handle and hit the Create button. And we get an empty task here, but it still needs to be configured before we can use it. So I can do this by clicking the cogwheel here. And the first thing I'm going to do is set the end time. So I need to think about when my class is running. I'm going to start this class in a minute. So I think I'll set the end time for this task at 3:30. The next thing to do is to add some to-do items. So I've got these pre-prepared. So I'm going to cut and paste them. So I'm going to add the first one. We're going to call it Read the Classroom Notes. I'm going to add a second one. It's going to be called Raise a Hand. And I'm going to add the last one, which is going to be called Follow a Raised Hand. Now we also have the option to add some more details here. So actually, I don't think this one needs many details, but for Raise a Hand, I feel like it needs a bit more explanation. So I'll add that there. And for the Follow a Raised Hand, I'll do the same thing. And I've done it there. Okay, so then I hit continue, and you can see now my task is configured. So the next thing I need to do is attach this task to a study group. I can attach it to as many study groups as I want. So I'll attach it to 2. I'll show you how. You hit the edit button on the study group, and you select the task and you hit continue. I'll do it again with Web Technologies. Now I should point out that this is on some paused study groups, but you can also add a task on a live study group as well, and the students will get updated with that and notified. Okay, you could have many more tasks as well. So I've only created one, but you could have multiple tasks in a classroom. Okay, the other things to point out here is what you see on the display. You can see the task name and when it ends, but you can also see the learner's progress. So there are 3 to-dos for this task, and you can see so far that the learners in these study groups have completed 0 out of 3 of them. Okay, let's take a look at what it looks like from the learner's side. So in order to do this, I'm going to have to start the session. So I'm going to set closing time for 4 o'clock and hit start. And the next thing I'm going to do is just reset these study groups so that the learners can see them. So when I take a look at the learner view, so far they don't see the task. It only happens once they follow and join the study group call. So I'm going to follow handle. And I'm going to have the other learner follow handle as well. And then we're going to launch this study group. And now you can see that the to-do list has appeared for the learners in the group. I'll do this one as well. You'll see also when they join, they get this dialog box that shows them what they're going to need to do. So I'm just going to mute the sound here so that I don't get an annoying echo. So the way this works now is they've got their to-do. They can see how much time they have remaining. I appear to have not set that one up well. So it says they have 23 hours, but they shouldn't quite have that. But I'll maybe show you in a minute setting up the time. But in the meantime, they can have a look at what they're supposed to do. Obviously, there aren't any details for this one. They just need to read the classroom notes. And when they've done this task in their study group, they click the checkbox And then they're presented with the information for the next task and what they're supposed to do. And so it goes on. Looking at what the instructor sees, you can see that the instructor sees their progress on the task pane here. So we can now see that this group has done 1 out of 3 tasks. So we can use this as a way of monitoring the task. I can see now that I set the end time a little bit early. So another thing I can do is just add more time to the task. So let's make this end now at 15:45. So this is the only aspect of a live task that you can update. So we can update the time, but not any other parts. So if I go back now, you should see that it's a more sensible time there as well. Okay, so this is how tasks work. I now want to show you a different aspect. I want to show you the different ways in which study groups can be formed. So we've looked at one way, which was for the instructor to create study groups, either in advance of the session or to create them on the fly. But I now want to show you another way, which is for the learners to create the study groups themselves. So I'm going to get these learners to leave these study groups. Let's do that. And they can unfollow them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit this toggle that says Learner Study Groups. And what we'll see is that the learners now have a button that says Start a Study Group. So they can now create their own ones. So let me show you how this works. They hit the button and they just have the similar dialogue, my very own topic. And once this gets posted, the other learners can see that study group there, and they can choose to follow it. And once they follow it, it's the same situation really. So the learners get invited to launch the study group call, and looking on the instructor's side, it appears here in the study group stream, and the instructors can still join this call just as they did before, and they can report it and pause it as well. Okay, so one other thing that I want to show you around how study groups are formed is spawning study groups. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave these study groups that have been formed by the learners, and I will go back to the, let's cancel this one actually, just to clean this up. And I'll show you this extra option that we have. So you can see here, we've got this study group called Social Learning. Now, what I want you to imagine is that we have set up this study group, and we have a maximum number of followers in a study group, which we would have set before the class. It might be 2, 3, 4 students, something like this. But we envisage that many more students might want to discuss social learning. We can select this option called spawning, which allows these study groups to multiply to accommodate the number of learners who want to discuss social learning. So I'll click this button and I'll try and demonstrate this to you, although it's a little bit difficult with so few learners. So I'm going to just remove the other study groups just to make this really clear. So we've just got the one study group now, social learning, and I will reset this as well. So you'll see it's here on the feed. And what I'm going to do just to kind of artificially create this situation is I'm going to go to the classroom settings and I'm going to make a bit of a nonsense setting. I'm going to say that the maximum amount of people allowed in a study group is 1, which obviously doesn't make sense because you can't have a conversation with one person. But let's use that as a way of just pretending and forcing this to happen. So we've got the social learning study group here. And now when this learner follows the study group, what will happen is for them, everything will look the same. But on the feed, you'll see now that there are two study groups. This was the original one, the parent that created the study groups. But here you can see this is the one created because somebody followed it. So it's like a child of a study group. I'm going to now do the same for the other learner. So I'll follow as well. Now remember, I set the limit to 1. Okay, which is a silly limit. You wouldn't normally set that as 1. It would at least be 2. But because it is 1, you can see that the first study group was already full up. So automatically a second study group was created. So now there are 2 groups of learners studying social learning. Okay, now another thing that happens here is, so what you might have is you might have 100 learners choosing this spawning study group and being automatically distributed into lots of copies of that study group to discuss social learning. So it's almost like an automatic assignment to breakout rooms. What might happen is that learners accidentally find themselves in groups by themselves. And this is because they were the one learner left over, nobody else chose the topic, and so they're sitting there waiting by themselves. At that point, they get a prompt that offers to reassign them their study groups, and if they reject that, they end up with this button tumbleweed, which symbolizes that nobody is in this study group. So they can hit this button and they're going to be reassigned to a different study group. And so this can happen. And now you'll see that both of the learners are in the same study group and they've been launched into a call with each other. And so that's how that feature works. It's a little bit confusing, but it's a very flexible feature that allows for study groups that you set up to expand according to the number of students and what students want to talk about within their session. Okay, I want to show you one more feature relating to study groups, and that is the raise hand feature. So we looked before at learners raising hands individually, but there is a scenario where they're in a study group and they might want to raise a hand for their whole study group. So they're trying to do a task and something doesn't make sense, so they want to ask the instructor. So they can do this by hitting the raise hand button here, and they can fill in a very similar looking dialog box. So I'll just do this, and they can submit the raised hand. Now they can track the progress here by pressing this button. They can see that they're first in line. From the instructor's perspective, everything looks really very similar. So they see the raised hand, but now they can see it belongs to a study group rather than an individual learner. And when the instructor hits call, it simply joins the instructor to the existing study group call. So here I am, and I'm talking to the 2 students in that study group. And when I'm done, it's exactly the same response. I can hit solved, I can flag it, or reset the question if I want to. So I'm going to hit solved and leave the study group. So again, that doesn't stop the study group from running. It just adds the instructor into the study group to answer that specific question. And that's about it for study groups. In the final video of this series, I'm going to be taking you into more detail about micro sessions, and specifically we're going to look at setting up live streaming.